Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Now, I am genuinely excited to speak with today's guest. Her name is Donna Loughlin, and she is the founder of LMGPR. And she's known for her work with futurists and innovators. And she has launched more than 500 companies. Yes, that's right, 500. Taking them from stealth to market leaders, all since she formed her agency way back in 2002. And she is also my tech podcasting cousin because she hosts Before It Happened, a leading narrative podcast featuring visionaries and the moments, events and realizations that inspired them to change our lives for the better. And she also excels in the realm of storytelling and uses those skills to propel new companies into the mainstream. And this is quite evident in the fact that she has reached over 2 million per month through the Before Happened podcast. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to the Bay Area, where Donna is waiting to share her story with us today. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Donna. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, thank you so much, Neil, for having me on the show. I'm Donna Loughlin, and I'm a storyteller. And my journey started when I was about 8 years old, working in the back of a print shop and publishing house that my father and my uncles owned. And so I was a very early age reporter in the making. So I would go about in my community, which was known as the Land of Heart's Delight, which is now called the Silicon Valley. And it was agriculture belt. And at the time when I was growing up, the aerospace industry and defense manufacturing type of companies and the Hewlett Packard and some of the early technology companies were already here. It was this pre-Apple and Google and Twitter and all these companies that we know today. But at the time, there was another business boom, and that business boom, led to my family owning a whole host of community papers, 40 papers, and around the Northern California and parts of Southern California. So I would go out and I would interview with my uncles at age 8, the shopkeepers and the small business owners and entrepreneurs and the future leaders in the tech sector. So by the time I was 16, had been published. I'd been on broadcast. I'd been on radio, and I was on my way for my career as a journalist.
Wow, incredibly cool story. And from there, of course, you became the founder of LMGPR, known for your work with futurists and innovators. And I think we should also highlight, you've launched more than 500 companies, taking them from stealth to market leaders since forming your agency back in 2002. But the question I've got to ask, I know you listen to the podcast, so you know I'm going to ask this, but how did all this begin? Can you remember that moment that sparked your passion for technology or the moment that put you on this path? Ultimately, what is your origin story?
Yeah, I try to get away from technology and innovation, to be honest. I went off to college and I studied journalism, and I was a business economics minor. My father schooled me well and said, you need to pick a subject matter that you can talk about. And so I went off and I became a business reporter, and I did internships with the Washington Post out of Washington, D.C. before it was owned by Amazon, mega, Jeff Bezos. And then I also did internships with Reuters, which is now Thomson Reuters. And that led me to work in Chicago and New York, eventually London. And then I did a 2.5 years with the BBC. And all of that brought me back to the Valley, back where I didn't want to be, and brought me into tech because obviously being a reporter in business and economics, the biggest economy in the Silicon Valley and in Northern California is technology and innovation. So I ended up back in the fray, in the Valley, in the industry, got my master's degree at UC Berkeley, and that immediately exposed me to what was then happening in the Valley, which was the startup entrepreneurship and all the incubator and accelerators and the venture capital boom that was blazing saddles in the .com bubble. And I was I rode that bubble really, really well. I mean, I love roller coasters, and it was like a roller coaster ride. And I worked with, I think I did 7 IPOs in 3 years. And so from there, I actually had a napkin that I wrote on, and I basically mapped out my business plan that I was going to do a couple more IPOs. I was thirsty to work with the innovators, and I worked in robotics and cybersecurity and early autonomous and IoT and pretty much any new emerging technology. And I continued to do that. But ultimately, over time, I unfolded that napkin that I wrote my mini business plan on. It took me about, I say, 7 years. And once I actually unfolded that napkin, I just one day hopped in my car and drove to the local business office without really thinking too much about it, and walked into the business license office, looked up the big marquee where it listed all the types of licenses one could get: barbershop, beauty salon, auto mechanic, insurance, services. And I looked up and I thought, I didn't see public relations. I didn't know where it fit. And so that's what I ultimately migrated from journalism to public relations. And so it was in the other category. And I thought, well, okay, well, if I'm in the other category, I guess I better make a really big splash. And eventually I think they put marketing services up on the marquee. And within the first 24 hours, I had 3 clients. I called venture capitalists I had worked with. I called a company that I had been employed by, and I called a news reporter that was deep in the tech and innovation industry that I've known. And within 24 hours, each one of them had given me a referral. And within the first 6 months, I made more than I made my prior 2 years employed. And within the first, I'd say, 6 years of my business, I went from myself to a team of 6. I hired primarily women who were part-time stay-at-home moms who wanted to continue to work in the industry, but also wanted balance. And I don't understand the word balance. So until I became a working mother myself and adopted 2 kids. And that was the same year I started my business as a year I adopted kids. So I had 2 infant startups at the same time, balancing. And balance didn't really exist. Agility exists. So I think that's the number one thing I've noticed with all the visionaries and entrepreneurs that I work with is agility and the ability to be able to really kind of be like a cat. I'm a Leo, so I guess maybe that's kind of instinctively the way we are. But for me, my agency was, I never looked back. Obviously, you can't, the rear view mirror does one thing, allows you to put some perspective, but don't look back. I'm a pilot and there's no rear view mirror. And so when one pilots their business and they work with other entrepreneurs and visionaries, I think one of the key fundamental things that we need to continuously harness is remember that moment that made you decide and ignite you and excite you to do what you decided to do and what you do best. And I think my authentic origin and journey started when I was a kid, and it just got to continue to grow and mature and become more sophisticated along the way. But I look back in awe of, I had access. I had a lot of access and resources that one might not have, but I don't think I would learn to appreciate that probably until I was into my 30s. And realize how impactful my family business and the entrepreneurship that my father and my uncles had, that I seized, the opportunity really young. But when I got into my professional career and I realized that I had the tools, and my mother thought I just needed to know how to type fast. And I remember saying, Mom, I don't want to be in a secretarial pool. And it was before they called it the administrative assistant. And so I typed my way right out of that pool because I learned to type 150, 175 words a minute. And when I was in the editorial team at the Washington Post, I typed so fast they couldn't keep me there because they needed me in the newsroom deadline room where I could type stories very quickly. And then I was a little bit naughty. I would start rewriting the stories. And so then I rewrite the stories, and I got called in one day and asked, who had made these, who had made the edits. And I thought, I'm going to be totally, honest and say, well, I made them. I think I think these are style edits and commentary that, that the readership and the audience would embrace. And that I was told to pack up my stuff.
No.
Go get my box and pack everything in my little wooden crate that I have. And I thought I was being escorted out. I was actually being escorted up. Ooh. And to the next level floor, which was where the writers sat. And that's the day that I actually went from being a reporter and an assistant editor to actually, to a writer. And so that was like my next kind of level up. So what I learned from that experience is something my father actually told me very young is be curious, ask questions, not just any questions, but ask the right questions. And I think that's something that entrepreneurs and innovators and visionaries do really well. We don't settle, and we're always curious. And that's one of the reasons I love science and technology and innovation. And I was fascinated last week when the James Webb satellite, the pictures came from the galaxy and the first galaxy pictures. And I was just amazed because I had never seen anything like that in my lifetime. You hadn't seen anything like that in your lifetime. And to me, that was actually more exciting than seeing SpaceX go up, because I've seen, rockets launched, and we've seen that over decades. But it amazes me that robotics, transformational technology, whether it be, transportation itself or smart artificial intelligence, 2 wheels, 4 wheels, things with wings, things without wings, the future of all the technology that we can put in our homes, our car, our pocket, are the things that can keep me, excited about working with the visionaries and technologies. So I stopped counting at 500. My clients have been in, I think, 26 countries now. Wow. I've been to maybe 82 countries personally, both professionally and just for my own personal travel. But the Silicon Valley kind of has a template and has a cadence that a lot of entrepreneurs like.
And there's so many great moments in that story. I in particular like the one very early when you didn't want to go back to San Francisco and the world of tech. It's almost like the scene in Godfather 3 where Al Pacino says, just when I think I'm out, they pull me back in. And of course, that's where you are right now. And it's like everything happens for a reason, it feels sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't think I appreciated it, to be honest. I went to my high school reunion. Oh my goodness. I hadn't gone to a high school reunion, which is very popular in America, right? You go to your 5, your 10, your 25-year reunion. And I went to my 5 and I thought, nobody's very interesting. We haven't really done anything in 5 years. Maybe you went to college, maybe you started a career, but maybe you got married and had a child, but we hadn't really done anything. We weren't leading a movement or changing the world. So I waited quite a while. And then when I went to my next high school reunion, I respected and appreciated, the class that I was from, because my class and my peers that I went to school with were all also in that same bubble. The valley was changing, the texture was changing. Some left and some stayed, and some did really well in various careers. I came back and, with all this experience and world travel, and I brought in a new level of influence and education and insight. And I think when we look at the world through a different lens, and I think that's one of the things that I work with my clients so well, is I bring not just the Silicon Valley lens. I've traveled extensively and I've met so many brilliant people in so many different categories and scientists and doctors. And I consider myself a thinker, not a tinkerer, but people that create things. And the Valley brings continuously this migration of new ideas and creativity. And to be part of that, I'm now part of a movement. It's a continuous movement.
And fast forward to present day, of course, that path led you to LMGPR, which is an award-winning tech-focused public relations agency with offices in Silicon Valley and San Francisco. But can you tell me a little bit more about the company, the problems you solve for your customers, and what makes you a little bit different from your typical PR firm?
Yeah. You know what? My whole philosophy was to work with early stage companies in emerging markets. A lot of our clients are pre-IPO. We work with publicly traded companies, but we also work with companies who are on path to establish their exit strategy, being either an IPO or a merger or an acquisition. We develop the content, the story narrative, who you are, what do you do, and how do you do it. Create all that content, whether it be press releases, byline articles, opinion, anything that's going to help shape leadership, momentum, and growth is what the LMG stands for. So we work with our clients in establishing their leadership. We help them drive their momentum, and hopefully we're going to be with them still at that growth stage. And to give you an example, I work with a robotics company. I've been working with them for about 7 years. And we started working with them when they were in a small incubator. They are now a publicly traded company. And what's so exciting about that is to actually, it's like your children, you get them off to school, and then you see them graduate and go on to do something in their career. And then they get an advanced degree. And it's like, wow, I've been part of this. And so currently my sweet spot really has been transportation, robotics, artificial intelligence, internet, IoT, smart devices, and not as much consumer electronics. I think in the last couple of years with the pandemic and the supply chain challenges and shortages, I have been in the industry long enough. I'm very insightful that a lot of the convergence of technologies have come together. If you think about our cars are smart. Our homes are smart. Things in our pockets are smart. The phone that we have in our pocket, sometimes not so smart. But but I think that's one of the extraordinary things about working in the industry for the last 20 years. I can be very selective who I work with. And I kind of sum it up to the movie Inspector Gadget with Matthew Broderick, which is a funny movie where he opens up the trench coat. There's all these devices. And I have to be pretty discriminating. It's like, do we need that? Why do we need that? Is this going to enable, impact, or empower my life? Is it going to save a life? I mean, right now I'm working with a brilliant doctor out of the Cleveland area, and he has actually created something that's zapping all these nasty viruses and bugs that are in the world. And to me, that's really meaningful. Do we need that over, a robotic, pet that's going to babysit your robot, Zoom Roomba or something? So I purposely look at things that are they going to benefit us, and our relation to and our user experience with technology is also really important. So I look at products that, are they going to help the next generation? We have a younger generation coming up. We have the Zoomers are going to go into management next, right? The Zs and the millennials are very conscious and very values driven. So we have to look at products and technologies different. And so I constantly have to be smart in ensuring that the focus group and the research and the content, and challenge my clients with not just it's a product in a box, but what is the importance and what is the empowerment of that product? What is it relation with us as consumers or as businesses? And how is it going to shape the future? And so I love the honesty of children. And when I've worked with kids in STEM education products and seeing them, an autistic child to be able to create and block and using block coding, to program a robot. To me, that's just amazing and fascinating that we're creating things that are going to ignite and excite the next generation to either be entrepreneurs or to be these creators and thinkers.
100% with you on that. And of course, there are so many new businesses and startups all having these latest and greatest new products or services that could change the world. But of course, there is so much noise out there at the moment. So I'm curious, have you seen tech change or impact the world of PR and get those messages out there?
Well, we're entering Web 3 now, right? Yeah. And so I stand back and I look at that and said, okay, we all remember, 1.0 when we first logged on to the internet as consumers, and and we had the screeching modems and all those things. We survived all that. And then we went into 2 and we've been all, successfully built a lot of e-commerce businesses and apps and all these things that we've, in our daily life and business. As we go into this new web, metaverse and the virtual components, I think we need to be really selective of what is going to allow us to be better, amplify the business or ourselves, and also be very selective in setting boundaries if we think something is not going to work for us. So we see movies and a lot of sci-fi movies and popularization of, the attack robots and being lost in virtual reality. There was a article during the pandemic that I think it was the New York Times, and it was the voice of Siri and the voice of Alexa became a very alluring, provocative voice desired by men between 25 and 35 because they had no interaction or contact with the outside world. And to think that a humanoid robotic voice was going to replace the conversation that you and I are having. Yeah. And so I do think we need to be selective. And so I think the future of Web3 is still out. There's been lots of discussion. The World Economic Forum is discussing the interactions between, the user interface and what is this going to do to social, our social well-being? What's this going to do to, the younger generation that has no choice? When I was a kid, I had a choice. I could turn the radio on. I was so excited when I had my Walkman. That was like, whoa, breakthrough technology, right? And then years later to work on the Apple, iPod and iMusic and Spotify, totally light years ahead. So I think in the next 10 years, we're going to see a lot of really cool stuff that comes out of the gaming, digital, virtual reality arena. I've already worked on like augmented motorcycle helmets and augmented reality in the industrial workforce. But I think we're going to start seeing those become less gamified things that you just have for entertainment into practical things that can be applied into medical, into education, and to industrial and even transportation type markets. But I think we as consumers should be vocal and be able to set boundaries and decide where is something, a hindrance and where is something, going to, as I say, either are we going to adopt or are we going to adapt? And I think it's important to think about that. Am I going to adapt to everything or am I going to choose carefully what to adopt?
And you highlighted beautifully some of the evolutionary steps that we've all seen in the world of technology there. But of course, for the most part, we're all looking forward and we forget just how far we've come. And I'm curious, as someone who's been working in the heart of Silicon Valley and the world of technology there, how have you seen the space evolve? Or in particular, have you seen the evolution of Silicon Valley?
Oh, yes. There has been, it's like a carousel of change, yeah. Right? So in the land of magical unicorns, and I think I listened to one of your episodes where you were talking about unicorns. I like to think I work with a lot of the galloping ponies. They're not necessarily unicorns, but they're on the way to, to that path to become that magical unicorn. But the trends right now, if you drive through the Silicon Valley, you're not going to get a lot of traffic. A lot of people are, not working in their corporate offices. My corporate office is right near Google and Adobe and stone's throw from Apple. And I don't have any traffic. But with that said, I think people are still working, smart and they're working hard. They're just working differently. And they're choosing to volunteer and do other things to add some dimension to their life. But I think one of the phases that I've noticed is that when I go to an Apple, I call it Apple boutique, but an Apple store, yeah. It's packed. That hasn't changed. I go across the road to a Microsoft store. There's maybe 2 people in there. So I And you look at the generations. Sometimes I see, like, it looks like appears to be grandfather, grandmother with the family, and the grandchild, like multiple generations in technology. And I think one of the things that is interesting is that we've learned to be highly mobile and highly, I'm going to say, relatable. We have a tendency to get stuck in these chat rooms or Zooms and all these different rooms. The one platform I think that needs a lot of help, and somebody is listening and they're going to fix this, please call me. But there are way too many work productivity platforms, and none of them really seem to work with each other. So it doesn't make any difference if it's a Monday or a Basecamp or a Trello, or just so many different Microsoft Teams. I have clients, and each one of them is working on something different, and none of them communicate with each other, these platforms. So it reminds me when we were all trying to get on the internet and nothing was connecting to each other. Or if you've ever been on just a conference call, the Polycom systems weren't working with the Samsung systems, and the WebEx systems weren't working with anything else. And I think that's what we're going through right now. There is this convergence of all this cool technology that's coming together, and there is a need to streamline how we use and how we work, professionally and personally. Because my kids, as example, they're that Snapchat, TikTok generation. Now, the fact that adults are on TikTok now, which is like, okay, the kids had a platform that they really loved, and now the adults are on it. And if I were in that younger generation, it was on Snapchat and TikTok, and I would be like, get out of my playground. But so I'm curious to see what's going to be that next, is it Web3? That's going to be that next equalizer for all of us, that brings a component of virtuality and the cryptocurrency and the discovery. And I think that's one of the things that people like you and me can do, is we need to have conversations about these. And this is the purpose of the podcast I created Before It Happened, is I talk to visionaries and the future they imagine. And I get into everything from food supply chain to sustainability to the impact of blockchain. And all these conversations are not necessarily conversations that I'm having on a daily basis with my clients, but I think they're conversations that ultimately down the future that we need to be having, because they might be part of our business, or it's going to be part of our life in the next 10, 20 years. I remember space exploration and the space food products that came out, like Tang and these energy bars and all these things that they're perfecting now. And they're bringing international, world-renowned chefs to create these products now. And for our journey to space, I don't know about you, but I actually would like to go to space. I don't have a need to go to Mars or a specific planet, but I would like the experience. But between now and then, I think the things that we need to do on Earth and think about our carbon footprint and what is our carbon score, and to be thoughtful and thankful for what we have. But I think we need to be thoughtful and not just the surplus of the things that we buy, but how do we dispose? So if we're buying an electric car and migrating up from a fuel car to an electric car, we're saving one thing, but we also consciously need to think about what's happening to that battery. And is there an upcycle process? And what's the next cycle? And, is it 2 wheels versus 4 wheels? Should I actually be migrating from 4 to 2? There's a lot of things as consumers that we can influence and change. I'm a really big fan of upcycling, and I have a massive vinyl collection. And so to me, that was my first upcycling experience. Was I got rid of so much of it when we went from vinyl to CDs and then to digital. And for nostalgic reasons, I was at an antique vintage store and it came across one of the first albums that I owned. And I thought, oh my gosh, there's, a piece of history there. I flipped it over and it was actually mine.
No.
And I found it not in California, but all the way in New York City. And because I moved quite a bit, so I didn't get to haul those things around. But that type of upcycling, I think, gives us a sense of kind of responsibility and accountability. And I think in bringing any new product to market, and I've done 500 some companies, I stopped counting at 500. I thought, okay, that's enough. Millions of articles later and 500 companies. There are some accelerators that do that, in a couple of years. We celebrated 20 years in the pandemic. I be honest with you, I was so busy working, I didn't even realize that we hit 20 years. And I thought, wow, that happened fast. It's like a marriage, it's just like, yeah. And I think in 2021, we finally decided, okay, I think we need to celebrate a little our accolades. But going from 20 years ago, the technology that I was involved with was cybersecurity and storage and early stages of IoT, and robotics was just becoming, in a market that the venture community was investing in. And then fast forwarding to where we are 20 years later, a lot of the technologies that I worked on that were a la carte or individuals are now totally integrated into the smart car, the robots, the motorcycles, the tractors, all these things that are solving problems in the real world. And to give you an example, is I work with an electric tractor company called Monarch Tractor. They make it's an electric tractor, but it's more than that. It's deep learning, artificial intelligence, smart tractor that allows farmers to basically become more predictable in how they run and manage their crops and their business. But at the same time, you're reducing your carbon footprint and you're increasing your labor without having to increase your staff, because there's a labor shortage. There's fires in California. We have climate change. We've had the pandemic with labor challenges. So when you look at technology in the light, what I like to do, which is not what does it do, but what is it going to impact and change? And to me, that's how I make a decision when I go to work with a visionary: is what is their vision, and what were they doing when they decided to change something? And don't forget that, because that discovery process sometimes takes you all the way back, just like where we began my journey, takes you back to a moment where you didn't necessarily remember, or you didn't appreciate, or you just kind of put it in your back pocket and you realized, wow, when I was a kid, I played with Legos and I built robots, and those robots were like really cool, and sometimes I have those conversations with my clients, and they forget. So don't forget your inner child, is one of those things that I think is so true when it comes to discovering, and particularly with technology visionaries and entrepreneurs.
And two other huge topics right now is, one, the big shortage of women in STEM, and also a global tech skills shortage. And I think, like for cybersecurity, there's a 0% unemployment rate, 3 million job roles incoming, and the same goes for the cloud industry too. I mean, You just can't help but think, come on, do the math here. But what does the industry need to do differently to not only attract, but invite and support more women into the world of tech?
I talk about this a lot. Girls in STEM.
Yeah.
We got STEM and we have STEAM, if we put the art in there, which I think is so important, that not silo education, that's not siloed. So when I was in school, a little bit of a laugh, I got to go do boys math. My math had a gender. In the world of inclusion and equity, gender-based math is just not going to fly. Yeah. But I was really good at science, and I was good at math. But in the school that I went to, I wasn't challenged enough. So I got to go to the advanced math. Today's classroom is it is an exploratorium, I like to call it, when it comes to putting science and art and robotics and all the digital educational tools that kids have in the classroom now, and computers, and not all schools, public and private, have the same access and tools, but there are a lot of ways that we can do things that we can do at home. Take your kids to museums, take them to science fairs. I was constantly creating things and going to these, what I call popular science fairs, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, whatever kind of scouts or local, robotics group. Take the kids and get them involved. And the girls are going to these things. And I see it in my own community. I've seen it in other states. I've seen it in other countries, that kids are thirsty. And so if you give kids access, and if you can't get if it's not in their school, then take them to, my father was brilliant. He would take me to Stanford University and Stanford Linear Accelerator, UC Berkeley, Davis, other universities within a 50-mile radius, maybe 100 miles, from home. And I would ask him questions he couldn't answer. He would take me to the library and he didn't get an answer. So he'd go find out, by taking me to Exploratorium, or taking me to NASA, or taking me to, research centers. And I was 8 to 12 years old. And now so much of this is online. And so bringing that digital classroom, I think what a lot of teachers that I've talked to have done a fabulous job in the past couple of years of being able to make things accessible for kids. But there's all kinds of forums. I love the Khan Academy. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but the Khan Academy basically is like a continuous online education at all different levels. And I think, for those who don't have the funding in their public schools, write to your local, to your whatever your regional leader is. In my area, it's the mayor. It could be a different figurehead in other countries or places, and to your politicians that are funding programs and getting, these programs funded. But I work with a electric motorcycle company, and 20% of the women make up the employee headcount, which is exciting. That is an industry that is predominantly driven by male, very male-dominated industry, transportation and automotive. I know, because I've been in many boardrooms and I only went in there. But this particular company, 20%, and the designers, engineers, operations, and not supporting roles, but lead roles. And so getting women involved in science and technologies, and taking computer science and engineering and mechanical engineering and all these different types of courses, it starts in the elementary stage to get kids exposed and excited.
And outside of the workplace, are there any particular consumer trends that might have caught your attention? There's so much going on now. I bet there's a long list, but is that anything that particularly excites you?
You're going to laugh. I've been looking at appliances lately.
Yeah.
And if home appliances, smart TVs and refrigerators and all the things I typically would see at the Consumer Electronics Show, but I went this year and I didn't go by and look. You don't have to get dressed. You can go to your refrigerator. This is kind of a sad thing, to be honest. And you could go to the refrigerator and you and I could have a full conversation on a digital console while I'm filling my beverage cup. I don't know if I need that. To me, that's just like refrigerators should keep things cool and keep things crisp and fresh. And so I think that's just going a little too far. And then I go over and I look at, the TVs and what's happening within the TV space when it comes to the high definition and the next evolution of that, and the art TVs, which I think are just beautiful, because I personally don't like the TV in my living room or my main space. I don't have one personally because I just don't like the way they look. I go into some homes and they have 8 TVs. Like, why do you need 8 TVs? I mean, would you have 8 radios in your house if it was 1940? But the art frame TVs are beautiful because you can actually showcase, your own photographs, your world travel photos, and art pieces from masters like, everything from Picasso to Leonardo da Vinci. And it looks quite nice, the beautiful art frames like you were just in the Fugazi, or Uffizi or the Louvre, those are, but then I wander over to like the home security area and everything kind of looks the same.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, some markets and technologies I think are just kind of a little stuck. And so where I think the intersection is when we talk about user interface and user experience. It's not enough to have a device just deliver content and data. You need to make it meaningful and actionable. So there is a company called Deep Sentinel, and their actionable data when you get a package stolen off your porch pirate steals a package, there's a real human on the other end that's watching it happen and tells you, hey, you get off my porch. What are you doing? You with the hoodie and the mask. What are you doing? Get off my porch. And I think that's interesting. So I went and I looked at other products, headphones. I'm obsessed with really good headphones and audio equipment. And there hasn't been a lot of advancements in the last couple of years, but there's some really cool things that are coming out for those that are doing Zooms all day long or doing podcasting. I think we're going to see some really cool augmented reality and sharpened audio products that that are meaningful. I prefer that over the refrigerator that is going to program my life. I just, and the thing that we need to remember with all these smart devices, and I worked with a brilliant security expert a few years ago, and IoT security devices, they all kind of speak to each other, and they can be accessible by other people that we don't want to have access to. Yeah. I didn't realize until I took their software, downloaded it, and detected all my IT devices in my home. I thought I counted maybe 5 or 6. I had 36 in my home. And I thought 36 potential portals for like hackers to come into my home. And in my office, I thought, maybe 25. We had north of 300 devices between the phones and the smart pads and the iPads and the computers and the speakers and the Rumba, vacuum cleaner and desktop speakers and just all these audio, devices. So I think when we look at looking at technology, make sure that we know what we're bringing into our lives.
Absolutely. I've been reading a lot recently about digital forensics, and there was a guy that was accused of murder, and apparently he was saying he was at home and he was doing his washing, and but he had a smart washing machine. And ultimately, the investigation centered around he was wearing a smartwatch which had an increased heart rate around about the time of the crime, and also his smartphone put him at the scene of the crime. But what clinched it was they managed to get the data from the washing machine, which proved that the washing machine was started through an app on a phone many miles away. So yeah, things like that, digital forensics, things you don't think about, but
I want though a washing machine. I mean, I was looking at these beautiful Samsung washing machines.
Yeah.
And designer colors. And that was the coolest thing. I was like, they come in all these beautiful colors. Like looking at high-end handbags. But they do kind of still the same basics. I mean, we could wash things by hand and hang them up on the clothesline. As my grandmother often did, because she loved the fresh smell of lavender and that spring feeling. You don't really get that from these. It's all convenience, right?
Yeah.
In California, we have to be wary of energy, blackouts and shortage. We do have what we call roaming blackouts. I think that as consumers, because more people are working from home, and or a combo scenario. I don't even like the word hybrid anymore. That you could be in a meeting and do your laundry at the same time, but if everybody was doing it at the same time, we might have a little bit of another crisis that we need to think about. So I do think that a reminder of our consumption is that any and everything that we buy, from the coffee or drink in the morning to that next electric car or home appliance, ultimately has to go somewhere. Yeah. And I had a box of cords. I looked like I was a concierge desk at a hotel. And I had this box and just all these different random cords from different devices that weren't attached to anything. And I'm like, okay, a bunch of Apple cords, I had HP cords, all these brand name computer electronics cords, but the device itself was either no longer or had retired. I don't know what to do with those cords. And I say it felt like a concierge desk, because oftentimes at a hotel, people leave these cords behind. And if you lose a cord, and you're traveling, just go ask the concierge. They always have a box of cords.
Yes.
And that's my travel tip. So I thought, what am I going to do with these? So I called 3 different local places to see if anyone would take them, because I don't want to just put it in the rubbish.
Yeah.
But those are things that are being upcycled.
Yeah.
So
I've got a whole drawer full of those things. I know exactly what you mean. And we have discussed so much in a short amount of time today, but where do you go from here? What's your big focus at LMGPR? Anything you can share about your big focus right now?
Well, a lot of robotics and sustainability products, I kind of put them under the umbrella of technology with conscience. A lot of sustainability, a lot of smart problem solving. I work with crime prevention robots, which is a huge problem. Keeping people, preventing incidents and detecting handguns and weapons and stolen vehicles and things like that. Amazing that we can do that, with robotics. Window washing robots, sustainable tractors, sustainable cars, sustainable motorcycles, sustainable bicycles. And all these products really create what I call the future city and communities, smarter, cleaner, and safer communities for the next generation. So if we go back to those young girls that are going to pursue careers in technology and STEM, alongside all those young boys, the future city that they're going to be living in, hopefully is going to be smarter than most humans, but safer and going to be greener. There's this whole discussion of wanting to go to another planet. I know, as I said, I like to go to space, but let's fix some of the things we've done here first. And let's not leave a big mess for the next generation, and be responsible and accountable. And so when I look at the portfolio of companies that we work with, I'm very excited, that in the next, between now and the end of the year, that we're going to be introducing, some really, really interesting products that make impact, right? They're not just, a cool, shiny product in a box. These are things that are going to change, the sustainable and carbon footprint and environment in which we live in which we work in. Outside that, I'm working on a book. Hope to get that out the first part of 2023. So, and my book is really focused on being able to share a lot of my wisdom and trade secrets to the discovery, curiosity, creating your authentic narrative and story, so that whether you're an entrepreneur and a visionary, or you're that college student who just got out of school despite all the world's craziness, what is that? What is that story? What's that authentic story that you're going to build your career on? And so I'm really excited. I'm working on that now. And my podcast is kind of, jogs along with that in tandem. But I'm a bit of a sponge. I have not seen anything this last 3 years, to be honest with you, that didn't fall into the category of meaningful and conscious driven technology. I think is something that the Zoomer generation is going to push us even more for than other generations. So I'm proud to say, if I put all my portfolio clients into one basket, it would be conscious driven technology. And I think that's a good moniker to think about how we work and how we live. conscious driven technology is not a category, at least not that I'm aware of. But we talk about the unicorns of the future, I think are going to be the companies that are actually being managed and led by those that are challenging the status quo.
I think that's a beautiful moment to end on. I've loved chatting with you today. Now, we started the podcast, though, talking about your origin story. And before I let you go, I'm going to ask you if there was a song or piece of music that has means something special to you, has inspired you, or just something that there's a story behind that we can add to our Spotify playlist. But before I ask, I mean, a few moments ago, you were talking about upcycling that album, and I was dying to ask you, what was the name of that album? Is it related to your choice? Because I didn't mention it back then in case it was related and we would reveal a spoiler. But so what are you going to leave us with today?
You're going to love it. No, it's not. It was the Clash's London Calling.
Oh, what a great tune.
Yeah. No, the song that I have been listening to, I've been writing and trying to have, writer's block, as they call it. It's very uplifting, soulful, a little bit of blues, but great dance. So drop the disco beer ball and get up and move your body is Jean-Baptiste Freedom. And I just love that song because it's a little bit the old school kind of Motown, bluesy gospel, just great arrangement. And I feel I have freedom in creativity, freedom in how, we're fortunate in most of countries to have freedom and freedom to be independent and the era of equity and inclusion, but also be conscious that in the world we do have a thing called war that's happening. I have a Ukrainian client, and it's real, and so knowing that I wake up each day and I do have choices and freedoms to do things such as write a book and host a podcast and talk to you from across the pond. But it's the type of song you want to put on and like clean your house to. Forget the electric Roomba, get the old, the old vacuum out and clean and just have a little bit of fun. But that's what's on my playlist.
Awesome. And it will be on our playlist too. Absolutely love that. Great choice. Great taste in music as well. You got the Clash album there. But we've covered so much today, from LMGPR, your story. We've got your book coming out. You host a podcast. Where can anybody listening find out more about any of these many different areas that you frequent?
Yeah, well, LMGPR is really easy. It's lmgpr.com. And my LinkedIn is a great place to connect with me personally. It's Donna Loughlin, and it's Loughlin. So Donna Loughlin on LinkedIn. The Before It Happened show is on Instagram, or just beforeithappened.com. We'll have the entire playlist, but the podcast is on all the major platforms, just like your show now. And I think we're like cousins in a lot of ways. I used to live in England. I love British music. I love British, all the British invasion music from the early 60s all the way to the punk era to I love Harry Styles. And my daughter gets upset because it's her generation. I said, I like Harry Styles. I can clean the house to that too. So
oh, man, absolutely lovely. Tech podcasting cousins. I'm happy with that. That sounds amazing. So what we'll do, I'll add all those links to the show notes so people can find you nice and easily. I'd love to get you back on in 2023 when the book's out. We can talk all about that. But more than anything, just thank you for sitting down and sharing your story with me today, Donna.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. Now I'm challenged to get that book done so I could come back.
Wow, what an amazing story, and just a great person, and just loved hearing her real insights and stories from the heart of the evolution of Silicon Valley, and talking about such important topics there about women in STEM as well as consumer tech trends, and the fact that she's launched more than 500 companies and taking them from stealth to market leaders is just phenomenal. So a big thank you to Donna for coming on the podcast today, and for everyone listening, if you'd like to share your story and spend some time with me, please email me now, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn @Neil C. Hughes. We'll keep this conversation going. But other than that, I'm going to meet you bright and early tomorrow morning with another guest who's got another inspirational story. But that's it for today. So a big thank you for listening as always. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.